Next up is a panel entitled AI and Your Brand Marketing Team, New Roles and New Structures. Coming soon to a cubicle near you, or maybe a Zoom call near you, will be prompt engineers and techno-ethicists and maybe some other job functions that nobody knew existed 2 years ago. So here to tackle this topic is our panel, which the first guest is Byron Burke, the co-founder and CEO at Lithero. Joining Byron is Megan Fabry, EVP of Digital at Sound Healthcare Communications. And thirdly is Adam Remiszewski, Associate Director of Regulatory Affairs, Advertising and Promotion at AbbVie. Our moderator is my colleague, Alison Weissbrot, the Editor-in-Chief of Campaign USA, which is another Haymarket brand. Please welcome our panelists to the stage.
So this is a really good follow-on topic to the last panel, and I realize we're in the way of lunch. Everybody hang in there. My stomach is also growling. But we were talking in the last panel about the do's and don'ts of marketing with AI, and in order to get those right, you have to have the right people on your team that understand how to work with AI. So while marketing teams will likely still have a lot of the same roles and functions that found on typical pharma marketing teams, there will also be new jobs, like Steve alluded to, prompt engineers, techno-ethicists, all of these different things. So to talk about AI and your brand marketing team, I would like to introduce my panel, actually have them introduce themselves, starting with Byron.
Hi, everybody. Byron Burke, co-founder and CEO of Lithero. Lithero came from my experience consulting with large pharma, and the goal of the company is to help health and life sciences marketers achieve speed, cost, and compliance goals. It's a artificial MLR engine. So our platform studies, approved content, references, PI, all the data, and then it can do things like spit out a claims library, review content, and provide 90% of what the MLR is able to do, help you annotate content, help you with strategy. It's really cool. Spent 6 years in research and launched commercially about 3 years ago, and so excited to share more with you about it.
Awesome. Megan?
Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Fabry. I lead the omnichannel planning and innovation team at Sound Healthcare Communications. We are a traditional advertising agency that focuses on communicating to physicians as well as patients, caregivers, with a little bit of payer mixed in as well.
And Adam?
Hey everyone, my name is Adam Remiszewski. I'm an Associate Director of Regulatory Affairs at AbbVie. I think before I say anything else, is anyone else here in regulatory by chance? One person, amazing.
We got one.
I thought I was at the wrong meeting for a second. So I support the Allergan Aesthetics brand, so Ali, Botox, Juvederm, all of those products we know and be familiar with, and I'm excited to be here today.
Awesome. So just a reminder before we get into the conversation, you can send your questions through Slido. But before we start talking about roles and tasks, let's define AI, because I think everybody has a very different definition of what it means. So Byron, why don't you kick us off as the tech expert on the panel?
Sure, I'll do my best. I think it's a very broad definition. Gen AI is really in the news, but AI is way broader than that. And you can just kind of unpack the words, right? Intelligence. You all are intelligences. You do things that we typically associate with minds. And so from a software standpoint, from even the hardware standpoint, our goal as AI engineers or AI companies is essentially build platforms that can do what minds do, right? That could be everything from object detection, right? This is a person, this is a face, those kind of things, all the way up to creating content, which is on the generative side, which uses kind of transformer models. So the broad category, anything that a mind does that you are trying to do with a machine, you're creating an AI. Lots of different approaches and works. In our work, we don't do Gen AI. We have a lot of neural networks, but their goal is really to understand the brand and then be able to simulate the types of things that you might need to do from a regulatory standpoint in terms of making sure that you're accurate.
Megan or Adam, do you want to try to define AI?
I think you did an excellent job. I can say right now that the way that we're thinking about AI, first of all, I don't think AI is new. It's been around for a while. We've been using AI for KOL identification, patient mapping, mining data sets. But what is brand new and where I think our focus is right now as an organization is how do you implement generative AI, both from an ethical perspective as well as from a compliance perspective, because there is sensitive data that our clients trust us with that we want to make sure we are using appropriately when we are moving forward with building tools, implementing tools, things like that. So the big conversation right now is not so much around what is AI, but how do you transform your organization when you're thinking about implementing something that is that will change how we all work? And if you think about historically, there hasn't been something as transformative to how we work every single day as marketers, probably since the dot-com boom and bust, if anybody remembers that. So that's really how we're looking at it and thinking about it at Sound.
Cool.
I think if I could just add one thing, one other thing to keep in mind, I know this is a very marketing-focused meeting, but at AbbVie at least, we're using AI in almost every single function. So it's touching drug discovery, it's touching regulatory affairs, it's touching marketing. It's really part of all of our lives at the workplace. And so as you think about new ideas, new initiatives, maybe think outside of just communications and marketing strategies.
For sure. We'll talk more about that. But I'm going to throw it back to Nyron because you work with a ton of marketers who are implementing your AI tool. So talk about how that's currently impacting daily tasks and roles.
Yeah. And task is really the right word, even from a technical standpoint. When we are doing research to get Lara to do new things, we think in terms of what's the task that it's trying to do. And that task is often, because we're trying to build AI, there are humans doing that task, right? And our goal is not to necessarily replace the human doing that task, but rather how do we accelerate them doing that in a faster way, new way, without making it harder. So the first part of our engine that we built, it was like the flagship, was really came from my background consulting around MLR. I spent a lot of time consulting globally, trying to get big pharma to move faster, take cost out, reduce cycles, the classic things, right? Reduce the risk of a warning letter, right? And I was targeting that from a consulting standpoint, training, SOPs, all those kind of things. So when we're trying to do the same task with a machine, the idea is that what Lara is supposed to do is that Lara can now review content. What that means is for the humans who review content, not that it replaces them, but they have less to review, right? So the big impact from all the different parts of Lara is really about speed, right? So reviewers are reviewing less. The agency customers that we're working with, their copywriting is going faster. So they're able to, we just had a trial done where they took a copywriter that didn't have Lara, a copywriter that did have Lara, and they compared the speed. And the comparison in terms of speed, not even close, right? That they're able to access content right in Word with Lara sitting on the side panel helping them. So it's really, tasks for people haven't changed, but the speed at which they're able to do that. And there's lots of research on this. Wharton did a study where they saw the same thing, or massive amounts of speed increase, right? So tasks haven't changed, but the speed at which people are able to do their tasks across copywriting, editing, annotating content, game changing.
Yeah, Megan, I see you nodding. You on our prep call, you were talking about how before thinking about how AI changes certain roles or tasks, you have to categorize what you want it to do for your organization. And, at Sound Healthcare, you looked at internal and external tasks. So talk a little bit about that process you went through and then how that kind of impacted roles on your teams.
Absolutely. So I think, and again, I talked about this. In our organization, using AI tools isn't new. It's the generative AI conversation that seems to be top of mind for everybody. So we looked at, what we need, where there were pain points, and I think it's a lot of what you just talked about. Where can we start to become more efficient? I think one of the issues, especially in my focus in omni-channel, that we run up to in pharmaceutical advertising is to do true omni-channel, you need more content, and in order to do more content, you need more budget. Except now with AI, can we start to create some of those broader portfolios of content that's a little bit more personal, or a lot more personalized, using data and insights from our target audiences. And so really looking at what are those problems where generative AI can come in and solve. I think one of the most important things, though, is this is being driven from the top. I think there is often something that you will see where leadership says, go figure it out, guys. With something like AI, you need structure. You need to have a roadmap for how you plan to implement it in the short, in the medium, and in the long term. So that's how we kind of built out our task forces and our teams. So while everything has leadership sponsors, we then went to the individual teams who are copywriters, our day-to-day copywriters, our day-to-day art directors, our day-to-day strategists, and said, where are your pain points? Where can we come in and help? And so through those discussions and through those brainstorms, we were able to put together an implementation plan. And this might not sound like, revolutionary, but a GPT that can help write better project briefs. We all know how important the project brief is, right? A GPT that can help build out derivative content assets. A GPT that can come in and basically help us produce things in more volume and faster. So that's really where we focused on internal operations. And then external, how can we start to create tools that are going to work directly for our clients and for the patient? At the end of the day, everything that we do is in service of the patient. So how can we help connect the dialogue between physicians and patients when we're not in the room, but they're there together? So that's really, we took a very methodical approach to it, and I think that is important. You can't just say, all right, we're going to just start putting GPTs everywhere.
Yeah, and I think, Adam, I'd love to bring you in here because another thing you can't just do, right, is just sort of like say, oh, you go do AI, right? Like you have to hire really intentionally for these roles. So I'd love to hear from you how AbbVie is approaching AI and how that's sort of changing roles. I mean, it's a huge organization, so I'd love to hear like the marketer perspective on that.
I can speak a little bit more from my experience. I guess first is, I think it's very common for leadership to say, let's do this, and then the marketing team to assign the most junior person on the team to actually figure it out. And that's not always the best approach. We were a little bit more methodical about it. We have whole teams cross-functionally that are looking at AI for different types of strategies that we're employing. I can say myself, even being in regulatory, is kind of like an example of that. I have been in regulatory for 2 years now, but prior to that, I had over 10 years of marketing experience. I worked in media, marketing agencies, CX teams, and regulatory needed someone that understood social, and they pulled me in to help them understand social. I think that looking outside of your individual functions and looking to see who has the experience you need to be able to actually that can actually employ or use that knowledge in building out the tools, that's most important. And that's what we do cross-functionally across the organization as well.
Yeah, another thing is looking outside of traditional pharma marketing candidates, right, to take on some of these new AI transformation roles. So, Megan, talk about like how you've been doing that at the agency, bringing in people who understand how to work with AI, and then I'll bring in the other panelists as well.
So I think that there are, depending on what the task is, we're looking at bringing on more Python coders, people who understand how to build. We're, looking at externally, I think there have been a lot of conversation here today around build versus buy. We are focusing probably more on the build internally, but you have to make sure that you have people who understand how to pull in some of the other tools that are out there to make sure that what we are doing is working. I think someone also said earlier, allowing people to fail is very important as they are working through the tools. But in terms of where we are from a specific role hiring perspective, I'm going to say something a little bit controversial, and that is we are not looking for specific prompt engineers yet. We are looking to train internally first. Because our medical teams, our copy teams, our art teams really understand the nuances of the pharmaceutical industry and what's going to fly and what's not. So as of right now, we are training internally on how to speak to the GPTs, how to make sure we're getting the most out of what we are doing. I think in the future, we certainly can look at some of these new roles. And they are going to become critically important. But on the advertising side right now, we really do want to make sure that our staff does not become obsolete. They need to know how to use these tools. This needs to become a second language to them.
Yeah. You want to jump in?
And from a software standpoint, I don't recommend people over-index on how AI models work today. So as an example, even with our models, things change dramatically. So if you're designing a role around how to structure a prompt to get a certain response today, we release a new version and that might change because we've updated the AI to be smarter. So it doesn't need you to be that specific about how to prompt it, right? So if you put too much focus on sort of version today and how you have to prompt it to get this result, that might change very dramatically. And even seeing this in other areas, right? SEO changes, right? And so if you focus too much on getting it just right and you don't have the flexibility in your organization to adapt to new changes as a technology provider changes, then you're in trouble. So I think the same thing is true for AI. And so I hear these discussions about prompt engineers, and it's like, that's not really the focus. The goal should be from an organizational standpoint, and different folks have been saying this, do you have the culture around innovation? Do you have the culture around learning? Are people using these tools day in and day out? Or do you have a climate of fear, right? And what can you do from a leadership standpoint to address that climate so that people are leaning in and they're not afraid, they're trying new things, they're experimenting. And so I try to advocate for, don't be too focused on where things are today. It's really about the culture of your organization. And I say that a lot when I'm talking to leaders is talk to your people. It's not just about the tech. You have to make sure you prepare them for rolling out this new platform, what it's going to look like for them.
Yeah, you're bringing up, go on.
I was just going to say, sorry, you bring up a good point. I think another critical success factor in rolling out AI is making sure your internal communications to your staff are buttoned up. You can't just roll it out and hope that it works. You need to make sure that people are comfortable with it. The first couple times, handhold people through it. This is how you can create an image. This is how you can create, these are the types of prompts that you need to put in order to create the copy that you're looking for or, the piece that you're working on that you're trying to create. I think that that is also, you touched on something very important there.
Yeah, I think another point that you were kind of getting at is just the tension between needing to move really quickly and adopt these new technologies while also being in a extremely heavily regulated and cautious industry, right? So Adam, I'd love to hear from your perspective from in-house at AbbVie, how you navigate that tension.
So I wish this panel happened about a year ago when I met Nyron then, because we actually have been building in-house a tool similar to what Nyron's tool is that helps us to get to that 90% place where we're able to review things in advance through the tool and then actually get more complete pieces in Viva. So, as a regulatory reviewer now and prior to that being a marketer, nothing is more frustrating to me than getting a piece missing indication, missing safety, having, content that's not supposed to be in the piece that's there. And so for us, it really, we're embracing these kinds of tools in-house because, and even external partners that are experts in it, because what we're trying to do is make it more efficient for our reviewers. Looking at the number of reviews that we have a year as a team within Allergan Aesthetics, it's like in the tens of thousands for a team of like 15 people. That's an insane amount of content, and it's just going to get bigger than that, So I think that these tools we're embracing. And I think one other point is that as we build them and roll them out, we're testing them in certain markets first. We're not just giving it to everyone all at once. We want to make sure that it works and it's functional and that it's actually doing what it's supposed to be doing before we just give it to everyone to use. So I think it's an important point to keep in mind as you work with clients on rolling out these kinds of tools.
Yeah. Myron or Megan, you want to jump in there? How are your clients kind of embracing AI
That's been
in regulated industry?
That's been one of the fun parts about the Gen AI. So Lara is not generative. It's like an artificial reviewer, right? That's the core part of the brain. And I remember the early days, because we spent 6 years just getting the thing to work, just doing the basic research. People underestimate how hard that is. And then the last kind of 3 years of commercialization. And so when we first started to commercialize, it was really hard to get people to listen, right? AI was like, what is that? That's not possible. I'm not even going to spend the time. Now we can barely keep up. And so it's even in the life sciences industry, there is top-down mandates, right? That you have to pilot, you have to try things. And so we get both on the agency side and on the pharma side, people reaching out to us. So that's been really nice. So I think what's probably missing with all the buzz and the push is what we talked about earlier in terms of leadership isn't always explaining why. And so I think that there's still a lot of change management, right? And so we think internally about not just the tech, but how do we advise around change management? How do we advise around communications, which is not the typical thing a tech company does, right? I'm not a consultant anymore, but we are having to kind of be a bit more consultancy. Because that's so critical for success, and leaders sometimes forget that in the hype around, get me AI now.
Yeah, for sure.
There's definitely an urgency. For what? We're still figuring that part out. And so I would say in the conversations that we are having with clients right now, it is around what can we do? How can we do it? Is this something we build in-house? Is this something we pull in an outside consultant or an agency, or a company like Myron's to solve the problem? And I think someone said earlier, embrace the problem, not the technology. That was brilliant, whoever said that. Because I think the urgency is fed from this idea that we don't want to be left behind. We can't be the last people to implement AI. But if you don't know the problem that you want AI to solve, if you don't have the team of people working with you to figure out, here's the best approach to what it is that you're looking to solve, now let's go build that, I think we're going to set ourselves up to fail. You have to identify the problem you want to solve first, and then worry about the implementation and the team that you're going to build to support that.
Yeah, well, speaking of that, we have a question from the audience for you, Megan, about what were some of the most awesome GPTs that you built, and how do you collect ideas for new ones, which I think is interesting because obviously you built them to solve a problem, right? So talk about the problem you identified and the GPT you built.
Sure. I think I said earlier, the project brief. It's so critical to what we do, we often forget about it, like, oh, we got to write a project brief. And so we put together a GPT that actually helps our teams understand how to fill them out the right way, so that we've got the strategic approach, we've got the problem identified that we're looking to solve, and the GPT will walk them through it. So that's one example. I think another one is meeting summaries. Again, it sounds like something so simple, but there are people who spend hours, days, weeks putting together these comprehensive summaries from an ad board or from a two-day workshop, and having GPTs that can help take the transcripts or even the video file from, if it's a Teams call, from that, and help structure it into, here are your key takeaways. So it basically erases hours and hours of what used to be manual input. And I think the first knee-jerk reaction to that is, oh God, we're going to need fewer people. But I don't think that's the case at all. I think these are the tools that we are all going to be expected to know how to use in the next year to 5 years. And the people who are going to be left behind are the ones who are too afraid to try it today, while it's still in that phase of you can try and it's okay to fail. It's okay to try and figure this out.
Well, let's dig into that a little bit, because with AI, there's always a debate about, is this going to take away jobs, right? I think from what I've been hearing from all of you is that it won't take away jobs. It will assist people to do things faster. But how do you see that like impacting certain roles in the organization? And then what do those people fill their time with to stay relevant? Adam.
So I can say that, so at least internally, there's less of this fear of AI coming for our roles. If anything, I've seen on our job boards more roles get opened up that are, specifically tackling AI. What do we do with our time since AI is now doing more of my reviews for me, where I'm able to do work on projects and work streams that I'm more passionate about than sitting and reviewing Viva routes every day. I'm able to work on individual projects that are more strategic in nature, that are about, it takes away kind of like the busy work is what I'll say, and it gives us more opportunity to work on things that are really impactful and more, projects that we can fail at and yet still try something new. Because right now, the amount of routes we get every day and the amount of tactics we have going through the system is just unmanageable for us. So this is why, we looked for a tool to be able to do this and be able to get this busy work, as well, I'll call it, off our plate so we can work on the more impactful work.
I'll tell a quick story that influenced me before I started Lithero, and it was a marketer that was hired by my pharma client to take over an antipsychotic, and this marketer was hired from outside the industry. And I remember having a conversation with her maybe about a year into her role, and she was literally crying because she was so frustrated that she had all these great ideas and she was so passionate about these patients who were struggling with mental illness, and she couldn't get her stuff through MLR. And she was just that frustrated. And so when I think about Lithero, one of the things I tell my team is that we're trying to help people do things that were previously impossible for them, right? Specifically around speed, cost, and compliance. And so I don't think about replacing that marketer. I think about helping her to accomplish goals that she just couldn't do, right? And so there are so many objectives that we have as an industry around, we've been talking about omni-channel, we've been talking about personalization, and you have some ideas about to do that. But even, I think it was one of the panelists earlier talked about creating all this content, but they've got to get through review, right? So you can generate a huge amount of content, but can you make sure it's compliant and get it out to patients and customers in a compliant way? If you don't have AI doing that, that goal is not going to happen. You can generate all the content you want. If you can't get it through the pipes of a person signing off on it, not going to happen. Personalization won't happen, right? So I am not as concerned about replacement, because I think with these tools and these capabilities, we'll come up with new objectives, right? We'll be able to do things at a scale, at a volume that we couldn't imagine before, right? And so that's why I'm not worried about it. Jobs are going to change, don't get me wrong. Every job will change, and you should be ready for that. But I think we will have new goals, new things that we're doing, new roles will open up. And so overall, I think we'll be fine.
Can I add just one quick thing? Is
Sure.
that as you bring in these new roles and new people, make sure that they're trained in pharma advertising, though. It is so important that they understand safety requirements, what needs to go into those pieces, because we're bringing in lots of people, even internally, from the tech industry, and they're leading these teams and they don't know what an indication is. They don't know what safety information is, and it train them first in what pharma advertising is and what they need to do in order to actually be successful at that first.
Mm-hmm. Megan?
And I think that's why I said earlier, I don't think it's about replacing roles. I don't think it's about eliminating roles. I think it's about training the staff that you have today, because we are in the industry. We are the experts in how to communicate within pharmaceutical communications. And so if you wholesale start to replace your development teams or your copy teams or your editorial teams, you lose, I think, exactly to that point. You're creating more work ultimately for yourself, and that's the opposite of what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, for sure. So definitely have a clear vision for what you want to do with AI, have a clear leadership mandate and support, and don't fire people, train them. Okay, time for lunch. Thanks, everyone.